All right, Dave, kick it off for us.
All right, so welcome everybody to another Sandpile. The subject this week is AngularJS in particular. We'll talk more about that later, and how it could be used as a filtering tool. We've been just starting to work with that plugin or framework, if you want to call it that. I'll kind of explain that a bit, at least my understanding of it. But first, let's go back over to Mike here and talk about industry news or BC community news.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. First up, we have upgraded the BC Sandpile site to HTTPS, which is an exciting day. And Dave, you're the one that did this earlier today or yesterday, and I believe you recorded the entire process to share with the BC Gurus and BC Academy communities for free. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We recorded it and packaged it up as a free or no charge tutorial. It's going to appear relatively soon on both BC Academy and on BC Gurus, as soon as our Kristen can get it prepared and launched in the manner that it needs to be.
Awesome. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a question of how hard is it to upgrade a Business Catalyst site to HTTPS? And maybe, Dave, give us a perspective. You just recently did it on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most difficult thing a developer could ever do in their life, 1 being the easiest. Kind of where does this fall?
I would say probably a 6. The process itself is quite easy, but fixing the little things is where maybe you need some knowledge and some experience. The documentation that Adobe's provided is pretty good. I think the videos that we did will probably help, but there are some things like absolute and relative links that need to be looked at. In my case, on the Sandpile site, there was some hard-coded URLs or full URLs in the menuing system. I had to go track those down. We even had some web app items that had some full absolute URL references to images that I had to go find and fix. And that's why I say it's a 6. If it wasn't for that kind of stuff, it's a 2 or a 3. But as a developer, you kind of have to know where to look for some of these little odd things just to make sure everything's 100%.
Great. And for those out there that haven't upgraded HTTPS yet, give us some sort of idea of the amount of time that's involved in doing this. And I know all sites vary in sizes, so it's hard to say, but if you can give us some input on that, Dave.
It took me a couple of hours and probably an hour that was fixing all those little things. The process itself was really straightforward and quick. It's hard for me to give you 100% there just because I was recording the process as well. So there's starting and stopping and thinking, oh, I could have said that better and re-recording and stuff. So 1 to 2 hours, it really was not that long. It was not that onerous a task. And say the worst case is just maybe tracking down those little things. So it's a pretty straightforward process.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. So on the BC Max or the Adobe Max front, I did hear from Magda that the discount code for new websites is actually going to be for anyone who signed up for the Business Catalyst pre-conference, regardless of whether or not you are able to attend in person. So be on the lookout for an email from Business Catalyst, I'd say within the next few weeks here with that discount code. I can't recall exactly what the discount is for new sites, but if I remember correctly, it was pretty favorable, 50%. So I think for the first year. So that's a pretty awesome deal. And of course, anyone who arrives in person at the event in Las Vegas is going to have the opportunity to take advantage of that special as well. Great. On the BC App Store side of things, we have 2 apps that have already released this week, which is really exciting. The latest one is the Webform Transfer by Scott Reynolds at Thrize. And I'm really, really excited about this one because we work on a lot of websites where we have to transfer a site that we built back to the original site. And there's a lot of, like Dave was just talking about with the SSL, like a lot of places to go and update things and tweak things. That happens with these new site builds, and being able to not have to worry about going through and combing through large web forms and all the different IDs that you need to change out, I think is a huge win. So Scott Reynolds, I know you're on the meeting today. You weren't necessarily prepared to talk about it, but I don't know if you want to just give people a little insight as to like why you created, what was the problem you were solving, and anything else you want to just briefly mention about it.
Scott went for coffee. Oh, there he is. Scott is shy. Scott's a lot of things, Bill, but shy is not one of them.
Well, like I said, I did put him on the spot, so we'll let him jump in later if he's got something to say on that.
I can say a little bit.
Yeah,
I'd like to think some of the reason he built it was because of conversations him and I had. We talked last week about this whole pair programming thing, and I expressed to him. Yeah, we can hear you now, Scott.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I was having trouble with the mute button. I'll let you finish what you're saying, Dave, then I'll jump in.
Sure. And it really came down to when I was preparing the BC Gurus templates, anytime we created one on the US site, in order to get the replication done on the European and the Australian site, copying all those forms across was just driving me crazy. And I used Scott's web app transfer app for that. So I kept mentioning to him time and time again how nice it would be to have a form transfer tool. And I think I finally wore him down and he created it for us. So thanks, Scott.
Yeah, Dave's not that far off. So after creating the web app transfer app, people said, what would be really great is if you did web forms. No one was persistent as Dave. Dave did mention that quite a bit. And it was definitely front of mind. And then I had a project coming up with a long form that I wanted to bring to another site. And I was sort of like the final thing. I knew that there would be partners that would be interested in it because they've asked me. And so then it helped me with my own project. So I thought it would be good to do. And it came out really good, I think, hopefully.
I won't put you on the spot again, Scott, but I have another idea for this week.
God.
And yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should put him on the spot again. What's the new app idea, Dave?
No. We get along really well, and I want to keep it that way. So I'll ask him about it first, and then if he's interested in it, maybe we'll announce it at next week's news section.
Sure, fair enough. Cool. So another app that released just real quickly here is the Cart Assistant Pro, and I think this is probably inspired by, I think, one of the more popular apps on the Shopify app store, which is really about improving the conversions in the shopping experience on e-commerce websites for Business Catalyst. So things like desktop notifications if someone migrated away from the cart page, alerting certain discount codes if they reach certain levels within the cart, and a lot of things like that. So I know that the developer of this app actually placed it on one of his own websites and saw such a significant increase in conversions. They felt it'd be a really great app to share with the community. So it's another great one to check out that just launched on the App Store this week. All right, so that's it for the updates this week in the world of Adobe Business Catalyst. As we mentioned before, if you have anything that you'd like us to mention, just email us at admin@bcsandpile.com, and we'll make sure you guys get a mention on the show. So with that, I want to turn it over to Dave, and I want to set the stage a little bit for the topic tonight, and that is Angular and Adobe Business Catalyst. And the main question probably comes up, or like, why are we even talking about this topic? Why do we even need to use Angular? And I think there's a lot of different reasons, a lot of answers to that question. But I want to speak specifically to the reason why it came up for us at Chicago Digital. And that is we get quite a few projects where there's some advanced filtering, whether it's with products or web apps. And web apps, as you guys know, can be a variety of things. It could be movie reviews. It could be plants. It could be products. It could be projects. It could be vacation homes, whatever. The possibilities are endless of what web apps can represent. And sometimes you have a really large set of content and a lot of different criteria in which you want to filter or search by. And of course, we want to make sure that this is fast. It has great performance. And so we recently came across a project in which we said, hey, you know what? We've came across some limitations of the BC web app search, and let's look into this world of Angular and see if it can solve our problem. So with that, Dave, I want to turn it over to you, and maybe you can give people an overview of our current situation. Like, what were some of the limitations or the things we ran up against trying to do some advanced filtering with Business Catalyst, and then why did we look at using Angular, and what are some of the initial findings using Angular?
Sure. I'll start by saying what drove us to it initially was a larger customer, and we were trying to overcome two things. The first was the whole 500 record limit, and I'll talk about how we think we can get by that in a manner that makes sense anyway. At least makes sense to us. And the second thing was we've discovered that in complex filtering, Business Catalyst seems to have a max of 6 fields. So if you try and filter beyond 6 fields, like a 7th field or an 8th field, you start to get random and unpredictable results. And we've confirmed that with Adobe support. 6 is kind of their maximum. And this particular customer that we had wanted to have a fairly intensive filtering experience for their clients. So that drove us to look for a tool. And I happened to be looking at Angular for various reasons. I just keep thinking it's an interesting and unique framework or tool that we can use. So I was able to put together a kind of a beta site to test the concepts, and the early results are pretty good. And that's what I'm going to share tonight.
Great. And I just want to stop for a moment and recognize one of the things that Dave just said, because we've been building on Business Catalyst for 7 years, roughly, or so. And we had not even realized that there was this limitation of Business Catalyst cannot filter by more than 6 web app fields at a time, right? And so you think probably a lot of the use cases, majority of the use cases, who really chooses 7 or more filter options when they're drilling something down. But I just want to pause and make sure people are aware of that. So hopefully they save a bunch of time and not go down that route and realize it like we did, and then say, okay, we gotta reapproach this from an entirely different angle. So I just want to give extra notice to that limitation we came across.
Yeah, for sure, Mike. And I mean, we've had lots of customers that had 12 fields that you could filter by.
Right.
But they may have made 1 or 2 selections, got the results they were after, and stopped there.
Right.
So it's just this particular customer, when they were doing more than 6 at a time, that we discovered this limitation that we hadn't come across before, for sure. All right.
So Dave, I think well, first of all, if anyone out there is familiar with Angular or has questions about Angular, go ahead and put them into the chat, and we'll make sure we get them answered. Like we kind of alluded in the description of this, and of course in Dave's opening comments, we are by no means experts at Angular. We're just starting to play around with Angular and Business Catalyst, and excited to start a discussion around the two systems working together. And speaking of the two systems working together, Dave, I personally have not used Angular. I haven't coded a single line of it, right? But I look at the documentation, and there's these double curly brackets. And I think to myself, double curly brackets, Liquid and Business Catalyst uses double curly brackets. How is Business Catalyst not going to try to render these Angular snippets as Liquid snippets and error out of me? So maybe you can help me understand, and the rest of us understand, how we even get these two systems to play together nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. I'll share my screen, and we'll take a bit of a step backwards. Just confirm, Mike, that you can see my screen.
Yeah.
So there's really 2 flavors in Angular. That was the first thing I discovered. There's Angular and Angular Extra Strength, if you will, or maybe Angular East Coast and West Coast. I don't know how you want to do it. But there's Angular IO, which I believe is called version 3, and it is more of an app-based tool for mobile and for desktop apps, like for backends, for admin panels, and building complex web browser apps. And I kind of started down that road a bit, and it just wasn't making sense to me. I'm going, well, that's not all the things I heard about Angular. It's not doing any of that stuff. And then I discovered that that's AngularJS now. So they've kind of done a bit of a rebranding. There was Angular 1 or 2 might have been 2, and then Angular 3. And they just rebranded to AngularJS and Angular.io. IO is the app, and that's not what we're talking about. AngularJS is what we're talking about. And it's really a jQuery framework. You may have heard of React.js or Ember.js or even Backbone.js, which frankly you can use on apps in Business Catalyst for the backend. And they're just jQuery frameworks that help you do things with jQuery in an easier manner, if you want to look at it that way. Now, I will say I did have a look through this BC Gurus course that Robin LeBeau did for us a couple years back. And that's where I kind of picked up on the thought of, hey, maybe Angular could do something for me. So I'd watched these a while back and then kind of came back to them. And this got me started basically, and actually gave me that answer, Mike, which I'll share with the group so that you don't have to go back and watch these videos. But Robin did a great job of explaining how to get started with Angular anyway. And that's kind of what kicked it all off for me. So to directly answer your question, there's a feature in Angular called Interpolate Provider. And it simply allows you to redefine the symbols. In Angular, it's looking for the double curly braces, which we well know we use in Liquid. This Interpolate Provider, you just basically tell the app that I want to use a curly brace and a round brace instead of the double curly braces. And then ever after, instead of the double curly brace, which is Liquid, you just use that to open and that to close for your Angular specific fields. Does that make sense?
Wow, yeah. And with the single bracket, curly bracket, does that mess up at all with Business Catalyst's legacy tags, the module tags and things like that?
Yeah, no, it's not single. It's a curly bracket and a what would you call it? A regular or a round bracket. It's that together to open.
Yeah.
And then it's a round bracket and a curly bracket to close. So you're not using a single curly brace. You're using curly brace around. So that's how you open it and close it. So if I was to take you to my output here, I'm sorry, I'm skipping around. I wish I can't really make this bigger for you easily, but that is how I'm outputting a field.
Okay.
So real similar.
Good. And that syntax, it looks like it's very similar to Liquid. So it kind of follows the JSON structure of calling variables. Is that correct?
It is pretty similar, and I'll come back to this because I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. I wanted to kind of take you through in a logical fashion, but really it is very similar. And once you get kind of used to saying, well, for Liquid, I'm going to use double curlies, and for Angular, I'm going to use a curly and a round bracket. One of the other differences is you don't use the dot in this case between item and the square bracketed name. I don't know why, you just don't.
Well, and I think that's actually the proper way to do it. Like if you were to call a JSON object in just regular JavaScript, right? You wouldn't put the dot between the bracket. And actually in Liquid and Business Catalyst, it works with the dot or with not the dot. And it was an internal argument, I think, between Scott and I, because me coming from, like, I wanted to be, following the way you would do it in regular JavaScript, and I would be doing it without the dot. And he'd be like, well, Business Catalyst documentation says to put the dot in there, but I'm like, oh, but it works without it. And ultimately we decided, okay, let's put the dot in there because that's what Business Catalyst is documenting as the way to do it correctly. And so ultimately that's why it's there, but either of them work in Liquid.
That's how it turned into an MMA event in the office there.
Not quite, but
not quite, yeah. So this happens to be this is a gardening site. This is the one that had the complex search. I haven't done all the fields that they want, but I've done more than 6 to make sure that we can get 6 reliably. I'll go back and show you the code for this, but this is basically reading from a JSON file. I've also got it to read from a web app. That's fine. We think if we get it to a JSON file, we can get past that 500 record limit. And that's why I'm trying to work with it through a JSON file. But you can see here, if I want to search for plant foliage, let's say I only want deciduous. So I'll cheat and just do a copy and paste.
Good. You picked the hardest word to say. That was good.
Yeah. So you can see as I start typing, you saw the results update, right? I mean, it's just smoking fast. And if I get rid of it again, boom. As soon as I type the D, boom, those are the results update. It's just smoking fast. I think I have to type the whole thing in. And then say plant type, maybe I just want shrubs. Oops, you have to spell it right. And like you see how fast those results, those live results are updated. And there's 498 records in this list here. Scrolling down here. So really super fast. Let's say I only want zone 4.
Yeah, it's like almost instant. I mean, really, I can't. I mean, maybe there might be a delay on the actual broadcast, perhaps, but when I'm seeing it, it's as soon as you type it, Dave, it's filtering, which is pretty incredible from a performance standpoint, I think.
You bet. And you can see I got 96, 48, and 36. So let's just say I want minimum height of 40. Like it's just unreal to me how fast it is. I don't want to be any higher, let's say, than 90. And those it's just boom, 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 boom. So real impressed. And you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 items there. Let's just say I want to go. I've got average maintenance. Let's say I want to just say only prune annually. And let's see if I just go PTEK. So there, I'm down to 1 result, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I've bypassed our limited number of fields there.
And now you found the perfect plant for your garden, Dave.
That's right. That's right. And let me see if I could actually. Yeah, actually, I could grow that here. No, now that you mention it. So I've been playing around with this, and I've got min height, max height, and I can do both min and max height, and then min and max width. That's all fine. You can put your search in a select drop down. I could have actually queried the web app and created these from the web app results if I wanted to. It might take a little bit more for the page load. I could have maybe gone to the JSON file and pulled these unique ones out of the JSON file. So there's some things that we could still do, but it's pretty impressive to me. And I mean, I don't know if it's translating through the display there, but it's just smoking fast. Now I can also sort. So if I just click on this is all Angular functionality. And when I show you the limited amount of code I had to do to actually get this to work, and sort by almost any field I want here. It's just really cool. So let me go through the setup on this.
Wait, Dave, before you do that, we got a question that came in,
Sure.
which is really important. And that is, right now you're just showing all and filters. Is there a way to do an or filter? It's like, for example, a multi-select or a checkbox field where we can say, hey, any of the items in this group and maybe an item in this group. So can you mix that logic?
That I don't know just yet. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make this stuff bigger. Am I doing an or?
Like, can I multi-select? Can I say I want in that select plant winners or the search plant zone? Can I get multiple? Can I choose multiple of them and have any plants that fit into either of those categories?
The short answer is I don't know for sure. The slightly longer answer is I suspect it is possible.
Yeah, and I believe it is possible too. Just kind of briefly glancing at the spec, and so yeah, we'd have to confirm that, but it is part of the project requirement for us to do that. So for our benefit, I'd really hope that is the case for sure. And then another question came in from Mike here. That's not an AJAX round trip, right? Just sort filter of the loaded record set. And I think that's correct, right? So each time we filter, it's not going and grabbing new data from the server, which is what you'd have to do if it's a Business Catalyst web app search. Rather, it's putting the entire JSON file, which is all of the data, and then it's when you do the filter, it's just I guess filtering based off of that existing data set. It doesn't have to make another trip to grab more data. So I think that's why you get the performance that you do from this.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you're basically on page load. It is loading that data either through the JSON file or through the web app call into a collection and storing it on the local machine. And then all your filtering at that point is done on the local machine.
Gotcha. And Dave, so the initial load, I mean, we've got how many items here on the page, roughly?
Just under 500. There's 497, I think.
Okay. So, and it was, so the thought that comes to my head is, all right, so if we're putting all this data into a collection, into the, into the storage, if you will, or the memory, does it take a long time to load the page upon once you do it, or because it's in JSON, it's a really fast format and it doesn't really affect the page load time all that much?
Well, I'll just do a, let me see if I can do a refresh here. So there. That's how long it took to load the 500 records. I'll do a clear cache there. So it's about 2 to 3 seconds in my case to load it up. Now, would that be longer with images? Sure. There's some other factors. If we got to 5,000 records, would that be more? Sure.
Right. And Dave, if you're going to get to it, that's fine. But Robert asked, can it handle more than 500 items, right? Well, that's the limitation of Business Catalyst, at least on the initial load.
This is one of the reasons we're driven to the JSON file. And perhaps in preparation for this, I could have just doubled the size of it or done a copy paste or something. And maybe if we have time, I'll go back and do that real quick and try it. But our belief is that by loading this information through a JSON file that we can do that. And we believe that there are tools we can use to get the web app output into a JSON file. I know even Pretty has an app on the App Store that professes to do that. And if not, you can just download your web app to a CSV and then upload it as a JSON file as well. Now, maybe you got to do that every time the data changes. Like there's some things that we have to work out for sure, but we believe it's relatively easy to get by the 500 record limit.
Great. And I want to dissect that for a second too. So with Angular, there's no 500 item limit. It can handle as many items, I think, as humanly, as possible, right? And of course, there's some performance concerns, I imagine, as you get into larger data sets. But since this is a Business Catalyst website, and we want the data to originate from web app items, we still have to somehow figure out how to get the web app items into the JSON, right? And so that, like Dave had mentioned, there is an app currently on the App Store by Pretty that takes any web app and all the items and converts it to a JSON file. And then you can store it. So that'd be a kind of a semi-automatic process currently, which is, could be a good solution. And then there could be there is a way with Business Catalyst if you wanted to completely automate the conversion of the web app items into JSON. But ultimately, we need a JSON file that has more than 500 items. And that's a workaround to a really fast way of displaying more than 500 items on a page, if you'd like, with these events, sorting and filtering.
Yeah, and I guess I would say if it works out and we discover that we actually need something like that, well, then my next conversation with Scott Reynolds will be about that. Oh, it's wasted. He's gone.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah, and some comments are coming in here, and they're great comments, and we don't know yet about the performance of this at really large data sets, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, we got to consider what it's like on mobile. You got to, make sure the Google page, you're not taking a big hit on the Google page speed and things like that. So a lot of considerations here for sure. And if anyone has experience doing things like this with large data sets and know if there's any performance issues or workarounds or whatever, I just know that, or I understand that Angular is kind of meant for this. It's meant for working with large data sets and filtering it and sorting it and trying to do it in performant ways. And I believe Angular is even, contributed by Google or originated by Google, right? So I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be faster than anything that you can do in Business Catalyst. Definitely not. But I think when the alternative of doing some of this stuff just natively within the Business Catalyst and Ajax web searching you might find that in many cases, this could be faster than doing it that way. So I don't know for sure at this point.
I know a few years back, I used another jQuery tool called Data Tables. And I had some custom code I wrote to load 500 records in, load another 500 in, load another 500 in until you ran out of the 500s, and then loaded data tables against that. And it was bordering on 20 to 30 seconds to load some 5,000 records. And I suspect this will be significantly faster than that. So let me just cover quickly some of the setup, which may answer some of the questions that are sitting there. So obviously I load jQuery first. And then the next thing I do is I'm loading a CDN for the Ajax, angular.min.js. You can load that locally if you want. I'm choosing to load it from a CDN. And then at the bottom, I load my standard little extras and my standard scripts for just the regular website operation. And then these two come next, which is app.js and controllers, webapp.controller.js. And these are just suggestions. I'd say Robin LeBeau covers it, and even the AngularJS course that I'm taking covers maybe this setup as common practice. App.js is kind of the boot file, if you will. That's what kicks everything off. And then controller is what interacts with your page. This factory is how I'm getting that data. So I'm passing it something called user data collection, and I'll show you that in a sec. And I'm doing the pipe JSON to put it in JSON format. So I'm passing that to my app in a variable called webapp data, and it's just a collection called user data collection. And that comes from,
so that's the bridge between the two systems right there.
That's right. And that's coming from here, this module JSON call. And the JSON equals app.data.products.json, which just looks like this. It's just a JSON file. And it's putting into a collection called user data collection. And then we're telling the app about that with that tool. For whatever reason, they can't be on the same page. That's one of the things Robin said. And sure enough, I tried it. Doesn't work.
Oh, Dave, you got to go through that one more time. So what are the two things that are required in order for this to work? And and just restate that they can't be on the same page. This is news to me.
Okay, so you load Angular from the CDN.
Yep.
You kick off app.js, which is basically the boot. It's booting up your application, if you will. The controller is what interacts with the page. And then the data comes from this. And all I'm really doing is I'm creating what's called a factory. That's what they call their data warehouse, if you will. I'm giving it a name of web app data. And what I'm returning, or what I'm passing it, is that JSON collection.
Okay.
That this is the page template that I'm looking at. On the page itself, which has that page template applied to it, I have a module JSON call at the bottom that's basically taking a JSON file and putting it into that collection called user data collection.
Gotcha. So you're saying that this call to the module JSON that stores the collection, user data collection, cannot be in the same file as where you're initializing the Angular.
That's right. So I could not put it there. It does not work.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too. So some things you fight, some things you don't. So you can see here, this is commented out, but this is where I was working with that same information from a web app. And I put it in the same collection. It works exactly the same, except I can only get 500 records there, right? So in the JSON file, we can go beyond that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, the app.js is the boot. I'm basically just defining an app. I'm calling it app. This is Angular specific text. I mean, you're going to have to get that from a course, or you're going to have to get that from their dev page, but that's basically all it takes. This was that interpolate provider, which tells my app, because I've defined it as app here. So app.config, hey, when you see a curly bracket and a curved bracket, that's what this guy wants to use instead of the standard. That's all that's really saying.
I think that curved bracket is known as a parentheses, Dave.
Thank you for that. I was blanking out on it.
I was blanking out on it earlier too, and I didn't want to call it out, but then it finally came to my head. I'm like, no, I want to know, make it known that we actually know what that is.
Yeah. So curly brace, and this curly brace probably has maybe someone out there knows the unique name for that, but curly brace parentheses curly brace. That's how we do it. And when I look at that web app controller, where did I put that? I thought I had it open.
Well, so Mike had wrote in and said that there could be a liquid scoping problem. That's why you need to put it in two different spots. So
Could be.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. So here's that web app data variable that I passed through that factory. And then I'm saying scope.data equals web app data. So scope is defined on my page as when I come here and I've got my data ng-app equals app. That's my scope. Anything within this div is my scope. And I'm saying, hey, when I'm talking about the data for that scope, it comes from that web app data that I pass, which is in effect that JSON file. These are just for some of the sorting things. There's a sort by, this reverse. That's just that functionality where I can sort by this way or this way. So you're applying functions. This scope.greater than, scope.less than is how I'm doing this. I'm looking for something that's greater than this and less than that. So you're defining simple functions. This other stuff is stuff I've been playing with. That's why it's commented out. But this is it for the code that makes that whole page work.
Got it. And Dave, if people out there are familiar with JavaScript, let's say someone familiar with jQuery, and trying to learn Angular. I mean, Angular feels like a different way of approaching writing, code, writing JavaScript, right? I think it even uses the MVC model, if I'm not mistaken. As you were learning this, was there any gotcha or light bulb moments where it's like, oh my gosh, this now makes total sense? Whereas when you first dove into it, it probably seemed really intimidating and confusing.
It's getting there, and I'll show you why when I get to that spot.
Okay.
To get this up and working was a little bit of search, a little bit of going to Stack Overflow, getting my answers off of the developer guide, plug and pray, and oh, that worked. I don't know why. So to get this to this far, just so we could even just decide, hey, is this a direction we want to look further in? There was a fair bit of that. So I followed that up with. I discovered this particular course on Code School, which I'm a member of, and I'm partway through this, and I'm building my app, following along with this course, and I'm kind of this far. So, in much the same, I'm starting to understand this stuff better, and it's this course that's making the difference for me. And it starts much the same way. Here's my app. Here's my controller. In this case, I've got these gems, which should look familiar. It's just another JSON file. So I'm not pointing at a JSON file. I'm just loading it as a variable. But in much the same way, I've got this stuff going out on the page, but I'm understanding it better. And I guess that's the key.
Very nice.
You start to do some things like, again, I've got my ng-app equals store. Well, that's my scope. Well, I put it on HTML this time because that's what they said to do. ng hide, if the product's sold out, it doesn't show up. So if I go to here and I've got this sold out false, if the data says that sold out is true, then that's how I don't have to do anything fancy with Liquid or anything else. It just, in my repeat statement, which is what puts it out on the page, it just won't show that particular item. ng repeat says product in store.products. Looks like Liquid, right? So all it's repeating out is product in store.products. So when I go to here, I've got this .products. So it's looping through that. That's set to gems, which is just all this data. Let me get that.
So Dave, this just spurred an idea for me. So let's just say that we're working with the client and they've got some inventory system. And let's even pretend that inventory system doesn't even have a public API, right? And we wanted to sync up inventory to their website. If we got the client to, let's say, every day create a FTP into the website and create a routine to automatically create a JSON file with the mappings of the product IDs with the inventory levels, then we could read that in the front end, right? Well, really, actually, using Liquid and then a combination of Angular, and we can kind of have that kind of a cheaper inventory control solution without having to do like this middle app that then sits and updates the product data and syncs it all back and forth. We can kind of get some of our information from another source using this method. So it can be like a hybrid.
Yeah, I believe you're right. I don't know if maybe we could even point to their server for the JSON file. There might be some cross-domain issues with that, but I think you're probably right. So again, very Liquid-like. ng repeat is product in store.products, order by backwards price. So I've got it sorted by highest to lowest price. Product.images, full. So if I go to this app, I'm going to go here to product.images, and I'm getting the first full. And then I thought, I should be able to loop through that. So now I've got another ng repeat here, image in product.images. I'm limiting it to 4. So I'm looping this out onto the page, and I'm limiting it to 4. Just I'm testing stuff. Like I'm just seeing how easy is it to do this stuff. Image.full looks familiar, right? Product.name looks familiar.
Right.
Oh look, product.price currency. Now you will notice in this case, I haven't turned Liquid on for this site yet. So I wanted to follow along with the course, and by doing that, I didn't want to turn Liquid on, so I don't have to use that interpolate yet. But all I should have to do, and that'll be kind of one of my next steps, is to change these inner curly braces to parentheses, and I should be just fine.
Excellent. So Dave, we had a question come in, which is, can you ditch jQuery altogether now? So if we're going to use Angular on a website, is there a reason that we need to use jQuery? Is Angular dependent on the jQuery library, or are there certain things that we still like to do in jQuery that we wouldn't do in Angular? But maybe you can kind of speak to the idea of not having to use jQuery anymore if we're going to use Angular.
No, you still need to use jQuery.
Okay.
Yeah, Angular is a framework that sits on top of jQuery, if you want to look at it that way. So
gotcha.
You definitely still need to load jQuery. It's a helper, if you will. It's a packager. When I say repeat, ng-repeat, it's using jQuery to do what it wants to do. It just does it in a fashion that makes sense to Angular. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that clarification because I didn't have any idea.
Sure. So even this can purchase equals true. That's in there too, right? So ng show only if product.canPurchase is true. So it'll only show this item this button, if canPurchase is equal to true. So you see this one has no button. That's because that one is set to false. So it's my point is I'm learning at a fairly quick rate, and I'm not associated with Code School at all, but I do get a fair bit of information from them, and I try and take their courses regular. This particular one, I'm finding it fairly easy to follow, and the only thing it doesn't cover is that interpolate, and you can get that from BC Gurus. But so far, I'm pretty impressed. It's not that bad. It wasn't that bad to get it up and running this far. I mean, this took me just following along in the course, and next thing you know, I've got this going out on the page, right? So what I'm looking forward to is a better understanding of this whole filter functionality. So there's a way to package up that filter so you don't have to do what I did on this page. So you can see here, I've got a search item name, search plant foliage. There's a fair bit of searching going on there. And when I get down to this filter, now it's a fairly complicated filter. Well, there's a way to package that up into a function on your controller page. And that's kind of what I was starting to fuss with here, trying to figure out. And that's where I realized I just don't know enough.
Gotcha.
Items per page was for pagination, but so that's what I'm hopeful that's Code School will help me figure out, is a way to package that filter up. And that's, I guess, what I like about Angular is it becomes very modular. So once I build that filter, or once I obtain that filter, even if I go out and get it from somebody else, it's like a little bit of a plugin. I put my code there, and then I just call that filter. I don't have to go through and build it like I did in this case.
Got it. And Dave, one of the things I think is important to note for everyone here is that we're not necessarily advocating go and use Angular for everything on your Business Catalyst website, because we need to remember that Angular is a client-side language. It's JavaScript, right? And so from a performance standpoint, a lot of times it can take longer to do this logic using JavaScript than having it render that way on the back end. So there's some of these things that Dave just talked about, you likely would just do in Liquid on Business Catalyst on the back end. But it's good to know the capabilities of Angular, and it feels like it's kind of approaching it in a way that doesn't feel too dissimilar to how you would do things with Liquid, which is nice. And what I think we're testing the waters on is, all right, in the scenario where Business Catalyst, there's certain limitations, certain roadblocks that we're running up against. Can Angular be an appropriate solution to plug in for those scenarios? Not like, hey, let's just do everything in Angular and forget all the power of Business Catalyst.
Yeah, when you have a new hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you really want to try and avoid that. But there are situations where we are bumping our head against some things, and this is an exploration of a tool that might help us get through that. But for sure, that other site I was showing you, I would not normally. I wouldn't use Angular for that necessarily. I would just output that with Liquid, right? Real straightforward. And if it's sold out, then you don't show it. Like I would normally use just Liquid for this output. Obviously, it's a test site, so it's really this more complicated filtering stuff that I think, from my perspective, I think that Angular can help us with this complex filtering, more so than just show me Bob and show me anybody with a birth date greater than this. It's where they really want to drill it down like this, and they have lots of data to deal with.
Yeah. And if there's others that have great use cases for how you've used Angular and Business Catalyst together, definitely let us know.
I think as I explore this, I think frankly, and I guess I'm talking out of my hat right now, but there's some form validation that can be used. So there might be some value there. There's custom directives, which is page interaction. So you can actually, as you hover over this, you can have Angular take care of stuff for you. If they click this, you can have it take care of stuff for you. And it's a two-way thing. Like I saw in the forms, there's a two-way thing that happens between the input. When you do something one way, it can also do something back the other way. I just saw it, so maybe we'll save that for another time, and I'll stop talking about things I don't necessarily know.
Sure.
I guess what I'm saying is I think there's more here than just complex filtering. I think there's other possibilities there.
Great.
Any other questions? I can stop sharing here and I'll stop sharing for now. We can always turn it back on again.
Cool. Yeah, while more questions come up, I just want to remind everyone on the BC Sandpile page, we post the upcoming meetings, and we are looking for participation from the community. So if you want to come in and join us for a conversation, or if you want us to get out of the way and you just want to present on your knowledge or on a particular topic, let us know as well. So we are welcoming of other participants and encouraging of that. We've also in talks with Adobe Business Catalyst to get them to participate in a couple more discussions or bring some presentations, because we heard from you guys that is something that you would welcome.
Yeah, for instance, next week I've talked to one of them, Barry Alt from the community, and we're going to talk about next week's subject. He's coming on as a panelist, and like I said to Barry, we're not looking for you to do a 30, 45-minute presentation. We just want you to show up. We'll talk a bit and have you answer questions, either from us, which I'll have some prepared, or even just from the community. So way less onerous of a task. You don't have to prepare anything. You just bring your knowledge to the table and just be ready to speak to the best of your knowledge is all we really need for participation.
Excellent. Well, I'm upset that I'm gonna miss that one, unfortunately, because I think it's such a great topic, the care packages versus support plans. And I know internally we're going through that, figuring out what's the best way to package this. Do we make support mandatory or is it optional still? So there's a lot of great conversation that can be had around the best way to position Business Catalyst and just the agency maintenance on a recurring basis. So I'm bummed I missed that one, but I'm confident you guys are going to do an amazing job on it.
Yeah. I think as we go further down the road with this, this will ultimately pop up in another Sandpile later once we wanted to bring it to you early, to bring it to the community early, to get some feedback from folks who may have already had some experience, just to let you know that this is even possible. So maybe you go out and kind of figure out something and participate as a panelist later. But we did recognize we're doing this early, and we fully expect to be coming back at another time with more answers and maybe better answers. There's a question in the Q&A I don't have an answer for, Mike. Did you see it?
Oh, no, I had the wrong panel up. Okay, so did BC get the Chrome bug fixed for the admin? So I don't really know what that's referring to, the Chrome bug. So perhaps you can elaborate on that. I mean, I know, Dave, you and we use Chrome every day. And I personally haven't been experiencing any issues, but I mean, that's just one person. So I imagine there's issues going on, but
unless he means the log you out or having to log into the same site 1,450 times a day, maybe that's the bug he's talking about, but it seems to happen to me.
I'll say I haven't really experienced it as much lately, but I think I'm not. I think I might be alone in that regard. I might not be switching back and forth between sites as much as others. But for those out there that are kind of frustrated with the log out issue, it is frustrating. Don't get me wrong. From what I understand, is that our customers aren't quite experiencing it like we are. It's partly because you're logging into a variety of different websites and going back and forth that is creating some of the issues with the cookies or the cache or something. I don't fully understand why the issue is happening, but we don't hear our customers being as frustrated about it as the partners are.
Yeah, and I guess I think the syntax came from you. The way around it, if you need to log into multiple sites at the same time, is to use incognito windows. I've certainly done that when I've been working across the BC Guru sites in the US, the AU, and the EU data centers. I find if I just log in through incognito windows, then I don't get kicked out all the time. So that is a way around it. It's got its own things that don't necessarily work the way you want in an incognito window, but for the most part, it gets me 99% of the way there.
Nice. And I think I saw a forum post by Liam yesterday or the other day that's saying if you upgrade your site to HTTPS and you do the whole login experience, like let's say, for example, over HTTPS www.bcsandpile.com, that he's not experiencing the login issues as much. So maybe part of this is the kind of the transition between everything being fully HTTPS. So maybe that's part of it too. Because I know, Dave, we've upgraded, I want to say maybe 25-30% of our websites so far to HTTPS. And if we get to a world where all of them are updated, I cross my fingers. Hopefully we experiencing the log out issue less than we do today. But I don't know that for sure.
Cool. I'm looking. There's not enough time now. I was going to go and just double the size of that JSON file and like literally copy and paste it and see what happened. But
so, Dave, what would you say? What's something that's exciting you about Angular right now, and as it relates to Business Catalyst, perhaps?
The biggest thing for me is the speed, and the minimal amount of code required to get the output on the page. It really focuses on that whole ng repeat instead of a big for loop in Liquid. Not that I mind doing for loops in Liquid. It's ng repeat.
Yeah.
Like, and it's, so I'm you enter that at the top. I don't have to do a for and then an end for. I don't have to do if statements. If this is sold out, don't show it. It just says, hey, like ng show, only ones that are not sold out. So it's a reduction in the amount of code I have to put on the page. And like you saw when I was sharing my screen, the amount, it's much more readable to me, much more readable than when I'm surrounding all that stuff with liquids, ifs and thens and else's and that kind of thing. That's what excites me.
Excellent. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there for today. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in. We really hope you enjoy this new format and the topic today, and we hope you join us again in the upcoming week. So thank you everyone, and we will see you next time.